you're a dealership who doesn't have a BDC,
it's a business development center.
Going into the year ahead for your BDC.
To a BDC manager.
When you hear the term BDC, you may or may not think of John Traver, but you should. Known as the grandfather of BDC, John Traver developed an infrastructure on handling sales BDC in 1990. He even coined and trademarked the name. Bob Gower was the general manager of a Toyota dealership 10 years strong when he became a customer of Traver. And he was so impressed with what John was doing that he left that dealership to work for Traver in 1995. There is a difference between retention and loyalty, according to Bob, and dealerships can achieve both by utilizing mobile repair and pickup and delivery.
Hey, I'm Bob Gower. I'm COO of Traver Connect, and it's great to have you with me today so we can talk a little bit about BDCs.
Okay, Bob, if you just want to introduce yourself and your title.
Sure. Hey, I'm Bob Gower. I'm COO of Traver Connect, and it's great to have you with me today so we can talk a little bit about BDCs.
Awesome. Do you want to give as much as you want your background, what led you to Traver Connect? You can give the Cliff Notes or how deep you want to go into it.
Sure. I started in the car industry in 1980, so it really dates myself. So you can kind of figure out the math. It's been about 40 some years. Literally, I was a general manager of a Toyota store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I had an opportunity. I started from the ground up, actually. If you asked the dealer that I worked for back in that day, he hired me, put me in the gas station to start pumping gas, moved me into the service department for a few days to cover for someone that was out, and then put me in sales for the next 16 years. In my sales career, I ended up becoming the general manager of that store for about 10 of those years, and which is a really unique opportunity to learn that business from one of the best in the industry. I left in 1995. I met John Traver in 1991 because we were looking at what was innovative back then in BDCs. So John Traver in 1990, very early, had really identified a need to build an infrastructure, not just call guides, but an infrastructure on handling sales BDC. So that infrastructure, he actually coined the phrase and trademarked BDC and the acronym BDM. So he was really the first one. We call him the grandfather of BDC. So while he wasn't the first to invent call guides and how to handle customer communication skills, he was really the first one to put this together where it was a process that could be executed daily with predictable results. So in 1995, I became a customer of him from 91 to 95, and I saw such an incredible ability to set appointments for the sales department, because once when we spent our marketing dollars, it seemed like we all stood around waiting for that up bus to come into the dealership. Well, the reality is we had 12 salespeople that literally were waiting instead of being engaged. So we started to handle inbound sales calls, follow up on unsold customers, call back our owners that had done business with us. And we started setting 1 appointment a day per salesperson, 2 appointments per day per salesperson, and got up to 3 appointments per day per salesperson. And it drove some huge exponential growth in sales. So I love that so much, that concept, that in 1995, I left my dealership job and I went to work for John. And John and I have been together for 28 years, developing what I would say being a innovator in this space.
Are you guys based in Texas?
With John, that he owned, was in Houston, Texas. He sold that company in 2000 to ADP as part of their CRM solutions. We stayed on board to run the Traver organization. John left in 2011, and he eventually opened up what was called Traver Connect, because he understood that sales BDC solution kind of needed a major overhaul to drive that business in the service lane. So I stayed and ran the team at ADP, then became CDK. of about 53 consultants until 2017 when I left and retired from that organization. And then shortly, a couple of years later, I went back to work for John at Traver Connect as the COO.
Since COVID, it's a no-brainer now with all the push on the fixed side of things. But 2011, that was pretty early. Was that a hard sell, or was it just an obvious thing that needed to be done to do a similar thing to service that was being done for the sales side?
Yeah, you know what I love about John and working with him for over 28 years is he's usually half a decade or a decade ahead of where the market is. He's just really brilliant in that area. I'm kind of the application guy, the developer, who takes those ideas and applies them at the store level to get the best return possible. So you're really the strategy when you look at for service, service is really different. If you grew up in the sales BDC consulting business, you thought that service was just an easy rollover from what we were doing in sales, but it really wasn't. So John's idea in service was, they take 7 times back in those days, 7 times more calls than sales. Today, after COVID, I've seen numbers as high as 21 times more calls back in the service than sales. So if you look at that, the strategy that worked in sales does not really work in service. So what we did, he started an outsource program where he could help stores do 2 things up front. And that was take the overflow calls at peak times and after hours that they couldn't get to. So if the phone was ringing off the hook in the service lane, which it does, even with a BDC, you really can't schedule your agents all at the same time during peak times. So you're always going to have overflow. So the first concept was to take the overflow calls and handle them off-site with a competent team that could actually take that call through a 7-step process, which included phase 1. Along with that, was stores had no one taking those calls. So, the concept was to take all the calls for service appointments off the service lane. So today, that's about 80% of the work we do today in inbound is to take all the calls off the service lane. 20% of our customers do have their own BDCs or a way to handle that in store, but they still run into a bind because the average store is missing about 400 calls. What we see about 400 calls a month. And you certainly don't want those revenue calls to go to voicemail. So we pick up those calls and we treat those customers just as though we're in the store. That's one half of that strategy. The other half is, if you take a look at inbound, and stores struggle with that, especially after COVID, because they're short-staffed. The cars are about 12 years old today. That's the average age of the unit in operation. We get much more calls than we ever did before in the service, and it's really difficult to handle that flow. So if you're so busy you can't do that portion, and you take a look at outbound, which is really what drives retention, in most cases, stores really seldom get to do outbound calls because they're barely handling their inbound flow. And then you add one more complexity to that, which is mobile service and pickup and delivery. And that's a whole logistic problem in itself. So if you're struggling with the first 2 areas, the third area, I can just tell you, we're not going to maximize that area either. So I think that's literally, what's happened pre-COVID, post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we watched our calls drop. 3/4 of the calls we were taking just fell off. Then after COVID, those calls not only came back, but they came back stronger than ever before. So I think that's a part of the solution, is to understand what's happening.
This is a side thing that I just thought of, and you may not know the answer, and that's fine. How does that work when you trademark something such as BDC at this point? Do people still have to get permission to use that term? Or, sorry, that was just...
It's really funny because it's like Xerox or Kleenex. Everybody kind of infringes on that right to do that, but nobody really knows where the source came from originally. Today, that trademark for Traver Technologies, owned by BDC and BDM, was sold to ADP back in 2000. So they own the rights to it, but it originally came from John, who filed for those patents and sold them with the company Traver Technologies.
Okay. Yeah, that was just that's exactly what I
Everybody
was
uses
thinking.
that, though.
I know. I know.
Brandon, you're
Like,
right. It's just like they just throw it around, And, we always say that using that term is really a compliment. We don't see it as an infringement. We actually see it as a compliment.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Um you touched on the increase in calls after COVID. Do you want to talk about and as well as mobile repair and pickup and delivery? I've heard talk, a lot of people, a lot of dealerships, they tried mobile repair, they tried pickup and delivery during that time as a necessity. How, but now it's almost like you can't unring that bell. Um, do you want to talk about the marketplace as consumers? How I was in the grocery business during COVID. It affected us all, and it just changed not only employees and what they were expecting, from their leaders. I left right after that. I was part of the Great Resignation, um, but also the customer. Like, we just expect more now. Do you want to get into that and then how Traver Connect helps facilitate that?
Yeah. So, these are some interesting stories because, when you have as many stores as we have thousands of stores. So, when we talked about post-COVID, pickup and delivery really was something that stores were doing. Some of the best stores in the country were already tackling that 4 or 5 years before COVID. So it wasn't brand new, but it was brand new to the general population of dealerships. So, we had lots of stores that said they would never do pickup and delivery before COVID. Then about 3 or 4 weeks into COVID, I was getting calls from dealers that use us and ask, what are your other stores doing that are doing pickup and delivery? So these are the same stores that said they would never do it. We're now looking for a solution. And we know why, because customers couldn't come to the showroom. We had to come up with a better alternative. Now, what's interesting is what most people may not know is after COVID, we've seen those stores drop off doing pickup and delivery. Even though the OEMs are pushing really hard, some of them are pushing harder than others to continue to use pickup and delivery and mobile service. And the dealers are working, I would say, diligently at it in some cases, but in most cases, when I go into a store that writes a couple thousand ROs a month, and I watch them use pickup and delivery, they're doing 3 to 5 pickups a week. And if you take a look at 2,000 ROs a month, you can do the math. That's in the single-digit percentile. So are they really in the pickup and delivery business, or do they offer it more or less as they need to? Not because it's an offer that they do every day. They're not Amazon, where they're delivering packages to my house 3 or 4 times a week. So if you look at that solution today, why is that true? Well, I think it's for a lot of reasons. Number one, this industry has been resistant to change ever since I've been in it. I mean, the real innovators in this industry are in the top 2%. Everybody else this is a generational business. And really, we don't see a lot of innovation and change at the retail level. And I really believe that's part of the reason that we're not more advanced in some of the things we're doing for our customers, like other industries are doing. So sometimes we fall behind. And I think the second reason is it's a logistics problem. I mean, I ran a store as a general manager. I would do pickup and delivery back in 1980s, 1990s for my best customers, but I wasn't able to pull that off for every customer every day. That would have been a logistic nightmare. I don't have the drivers. I don't have the tools. I mean, this would be a real mess. And then sending mobile service out in other industries a norm. In the construction industry, if you're John Deere or you're Komatsu or you're Caterpillar, that's the only way they do service. They do remote service. They do PMAs. They go out and repair machines. They don't bring them in. So they've been doing this a long time, but it's a coordinated effort because you have to have the right parts on the right truck for the right job. And that's what you're doing all day long. So, if I take a look at where we're at in auto, I'd say we're still way behind in pickup and delivery. Now, there are some great success stories out there, as we all know, but it's a few. It's not the majority. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys do to help dealerships, get more into pickup and delivery?
Well, there's a couple things that we do differently. So first of all, our goal is, if you ask me, what's your vision as a company? It's experience. So us, experience matters. It's what experience are we talking about? Well, at the consumer level, it's their experience, which is invaluable because it keeps them coming back. At the dealership level, it's be able to offer an experience to get those customers to come back. And at our level, it's about being experienced enough to make this easy and to be able to implement it on a daily basis and execute it well. So, experience to me is a key word. It means different things depending on how you apply it. But in this case, it applies across all three, even though it has maybe a little slightly different meaning. And so what does that mean? How do we help stores do that? Well, first of all, we offer a managed approach to that. So, there's 2 or 3 phases to making pickup and delivery or mobile service an excellent experience that is scalable. And one is, the first part of it is an outreach program. So, we connect with the dealership to see what their real needs are. What does a dealer need today? If you drive more business into the express lane and they're already overwhelmed, that's not helpful. And it actually changed the experience for the customer, might not be the best experience. So when you look at a dealership, the first part is strategy. This is a tactic. Remember, pickup and delivery is tactical. What's the strategy? The strategy behind retention should be, how do we use it in each dealership to maximize retention? So in some stores, I'll give you an example. I might have a store that has the need. Maybe their biggest need is they've got customers at 12 and 18 months that haven't come back. And every OEM measures that. And some of them apply an incentive to it, and some of them don't have an incentive to it. But we all know how important that is in the retail business to get your customer to come back, at least for the first and second visit. So there may be a strategy there. Recently, I worked with one of our stores. They have over 2,000 customers who haven't been back in 12 to 18 months. So that's the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem is, today, a lot of these franchise, some of them have a lot of cars, some of them don't have enough. But the number one area in business, I think, this year is pre-owned vehicles. They don't have enough of them. They can't buy them at the right price. They're hard to find. You're competing with everybody in the marketplace. So if you start to look at these and start to add them together and get 1 + 1 = 5 or 6, how do you do that? Well, the first thing I would say is, in the case, every store is a little different. But in this case, if you're looking for pre-owned vehicles, to target customers that have not been back for service for a while, that are still in what would be called a certifiable program from the OEM, to reach out to them, offer pickup and delivery as a convenience to get the vehicle back into the service lane, does a couple things. Number one, we know that service RO count is down over the industry since 2019. Since COVID, it has not bounced back up. It is down. The best stores are even, and the very best stores are up a little bit. But that's a general consensus. So what's the first thing we want to do? Reach out to the customer, offer them a convenience that's really hard to say no to, and then control the fact that we can add to our RO count year over year by getting the vehicles that aren't coming in. The second thing it does is it creates a revenue stream in service because you wrote an RO. The third thing it does is you handpicked some of these vehicles that you wanted to go get, which gives you the best of the best used cars you can buy, which is from your own customer that has been in the service department, that you just serviced their car. So you can reach out and make that an opportunity. So when you start to add that up, and the third thing is, when we deliver that car back to the customer, our first question is, how did you like the service? And would you like a subscription to do that the next time? And that's where you now have loyalty linked into retention. So does that hit kind of where I think the strategy is today? If it's you need used vehicles, if you need RO count, we can solve that problem because the first part of this was to generate an RO. If you need more revenue, if you need certain times filled in the shop during the day or certain techs that aren't busy, you can use it to fill that time slot. So, we look at the most motivating thing we can offer a customer today, in my opinion, is we can either come out and service it at your place, or we can come get it and bring it back to you. Those certainly are exponentially more attractive to customers today than a free oil change, a $50 gift certificate. Does that make sense, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ford specifically, and I'm sure there are others, but Ford, they do a pretty good job at marketing themselves, but they've really gone into mobile repair hardcore from the outside looking in, it seems. And, when you've got a lot of third party type people, once again, and I did a bunch of research because I was trying to see if it was going to come into my area here. I'm in West Tennessee. I'm in between Memphis and Nashville in Jackson. And we didn't have anything like that. Of course, we don't have any dealerships offering that either, but just like with everything else, you were saying about the industry as a whole, not really being too cutting edge and to take on new technology. But you're seeing a lot of cool third-party apps for mobile repair, and I think once again that could be a missed opportunity for dealers, where they're going to let that aftermarket take care of it if they're not careful.
Yes, and I applaud Ford for their initiatives to do pickup and delivery, and also to do remote service, to come do mobile service. When it gets to the dealer level, though, it loses a little bit of that juice, as I like to say, where the dealers interpret that and use it maybe in a different way than I think it's intended to be used. So, that's always the retailer is always the driver. The OEM, I love the fact I've worked with almost every OEM through my career. And when they incentivize something, it's because they want the dealer to focus on it. They don't want to be in the retail business. They want the dealers, though, to make sure that they have every opportunity by incentivizing them to stay focused on certain areas, hoping to build a habit so they can move on to another focused area to throw incentives at, to get that focus to stick and then move on to a new focus. And I think the retailers, while they appreciate that, there's no doubt, some of them don't take full advantage of it. And I think the reason why, infrastructure. So it's one thing to throw a program out there. It's another one to make sure that they have the right tools and the infrastructure in place to be able to deliver against it every day. So I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is there's a gap in the ability to find knowledgeable people in this industry that have tools that can train or can do it for them if they can't do it. That's what I'd be looking for if I'm a dealer today. If I don't have, I've always been teachable. So I always find that if I don't have the answer to the solution, if I don't have the staffing, if I don't have the knowledge, I need to go seek that out somewhere else. If it's for them to come train me on how to do a better job at it, or if it's for them to partner with me to roll up their sleeves and do part of it with me, or if it's just to outsource it to them because that's the business they're in, and I just don't have the culture, the environment, the structure, the market to do it myself, then I still need to seek out those resources, because not doing it really puts me behind, not ahead of the market.
So would that be an option for a dealership, say that, they say they don't have the infrastructure to do, and I'm talking specifically, well, I guess it could go either way, pick up and delivery or outsourcing that. I mean, I talked about these third-party apps, and their names elude me now, but there's some pretty big operations, and they're spreading across the country. Would that be a viable option if you don't have the infrastructure in your dealership to outsource that, as far as, and especially with liability? Is that a workable solution?
It is. I think it's part of the solution, though. Ever since I've been doing this with John back 28 years ago, one of the things I learned is that technology is an enabler. It's not the silver bullet. I have never seen it really be the silver bullet. It's an enabler. So when you look, let's use pickup and delivery as an example. The very first piece that you have to connect to that is to be able to have a communication platform, to be able to have a outreach to the customers that you feel like you need to have that service to bring them back to your business. It needs to be multi-channel in its approach. So it needs to have the things that include texting and email and live phone calls, direct mail, all the things that you need to be able to get your messaging out. It needs to be personalized. It needs to be strategically timed. You need to have a pickup and service delivery that is scalable. So today, if I want to pick up, if I have 3 people or 5 people in my dealership that could go do pickup and delivery, and I have 10 people that need it, it's not scalable. So you got to partner with, I believe, a partner who has the scalability to move 10 or 15 or 20 cars today, if that's what it takes. I think that's what stops a lot of stores right there, is they don't have the resources to do that. Certainly, the other part of it is integration with the sales department. So if I drive all these customers into the lane that are our customers, but we don't even see if they're in a position to want to trade or buy their vehicle today, we leave a really important component of retention out of this. So, you might have retention, but no loyalty. I might have retention to service, but those folks are not coming back to buy another car from me. So I think all that tied with, you need some type of performance tracking and reporting. Those are all the components that you need. So in the stores today that we go into that already have pickup and delivery, what we're saying is, let's maximize it. So let's have a strategy. It needs to be an outreach program first. The second one is, we're going to actually do the pickup and delivery. We actually offer that service. We're very unique. We're the only BDC company that offers really pickup and delivery. There are drivers that are going to pick up those cars. We also offer a concierge level service above that, where the concierge monitors that move from us, so that we don't have to rely on the dealership having any issues there, keeping track of what's going on during the day and where the cars are at. And then we get that car back to the customer. Then we follow up with a survey, and then we go ahead and get them subscribed to a subscription of pickup and delivery. So, there's a lot of moving pieces there. So there is one of those pieces alone doesn't solve the problem. So you need a combination of those pieces to make that work. If you want to be scalable, if you want to do this every day, and you want to maximize your market area, because the competition, they have to do the same thing to keep up with you.
Yeah.
That's always been what's really interesting to me, that technology, I can go buy the same technology you have. I can buy the same marketing you have. What I can't buy is the same process and daily execution that you have. I have to work really hard at that. And I think that's what separates dealerships in a market. The ones, you can copy everything that the dealer's doing next to you, except how well their processes are in place, how their communication skills are with the customer, and how well they execute daily to pull this off. And I got to tell you, they're tenacious about doing that, the leaders in the markets. That's why they're so hard to catch.
Yeah.
I can name 2 of them. Paragon Honda, Manhattan, has done this way before COVID. They own that market strategically in New York. Bozarth Ford, down in St. Augustine, Florida, population 10,000, they're probably servicing 30,000 people in that marketplace because of pickup and delivery and mobile service. So, but they do it so well, it's part of their culture, and they execute extremely well. And those are the ones that make a difference. It's hard to catch them in the marketplace, because not only do they have the lead, because both of them did this before COVID, you can always catch up. They're really good at what they do. That's the hard part. How do you get as good as they are without spending 5, 6, 7 years doing it like they have? So you got to be able to find resources to be able to do that quickly.
Yeah, I interviewed Ed Roberts, but it was for his book, and we're supposed to circle back and get into the mobile repair and all that down there at Bozart. And I'm looking forward to that. Perception is not always reality.
And, there's this perception that the dealerships are more expensive for everything. And InteliChek kind of confirms that that's not the case.
InteliChek helps dealerships become aware of where their prices stand in regard to their competitors.
And InteliChek does a good job of giving us that pricing data to confirm that we're in the market.
And this allows dealerships to make their customers aware of their competitive pricing.
I placed 2 placards in the business center so they could see that while they're over there working on computers. I also placed it in our coffee area. We have a glass wall there, so when they walk in, as they're putting their creamer and sugar in their coffee, they're going to look up and see the pricing for our pricing as well as our competitors.
Introducing InteliShare. InteliShare contains all of InteliChek's promotional tools that you can use to promote your favorable prices, including InteliAds, the printable flyers that you can show off in easel displays, InteliMedia for your digital media boards, and InteliWidgets, so you can show off price comparisons on your website and even let your customers schedule from the widget.
Just having access to that data that they're able to provide gives us a good plan of how we're going to proceed.
Call 877-827-7273 or go to InteliChek.com to find out more about how the InteliShare Series can help you grow your business. Without getting too much into the weeds, what does that look like on your guys' end? You're right. That's a lot of moving pieces. And if you're in the pickup and delivery game, as far as the outsourcing, logistically, that has to be a monster for you guys to and for it to be scalable, like you were saying. Do you want to get into any of the down and dirty of how that works without getting too in the weeds with it? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I always tell my team, why we have a distinct advantage here over stores is you got to remember, we're in a big sandbox. Most stores are just in their own sandbox. If you're a big dealer group, you might be 200 stores. The biggest dealer groups are in the 250, 270 range. We have thousands of stores. So first of all, I would say that our ability to see what's happening is a little bit broader. So we get to see more than the average dealer group would see, number one. Number two, we're making thousands and thousands of calls a day and outbound. So that's not new to us. We have the team in place. We have productivity measures that are in place. We're not making 80 calls by every agent a day like maybe you would in an internal BDC in a store. We're making 280 calls a day per agent. So it becomes financially feasible to do it. That would be the outreach type program, first of all, right? So we have the right tools to be able to do it. That's really important. They're not CRM tools. They're telephony tools. So there's a big difference between a telephony tool and a CRM tool. So we use telephony tools with our own proprietary software to capture all this data from the calls. That's the first piece. The second piece is we're scheduling in the dealer's schedulers. So, my team has to know 17 schedulers today that are out there because we don't want to just set an appointment and have the dealer do all the work. We want to be able to have this integrated. We want to see that you have 5 spots open tomorrow. Can we fill those? That's our job, right? And then the type of work, because we can see by op code what it's going to take to fill the shop today and target the type of work. So that's on let's call that just the outreach side, right? Without getting too far in the weeds. Then you have the move itself. So once we set up a move by Brandon, we can pick up your car next week to get that service done. And you say, okay for that. Then we're like, okay, so let's do this. We're going to assign a concierge to you. And that concierge is going to reach out and say, Brandon, I'm your concierge for your move today. So you're going to get an app. The app's going to show you where your driver is. We're going to pick the car up. We're going to get it to the dealership and we're going to get it back. And I'm going to be over that move today myself. So it gives the customer that added trust that they have a relationship with somebody that's moving the car not just a link to an app that says the driver's showing up in 10 minutes, right? So that's what I'm talking about, the experience, changing the experience. Technology doesn't change the experience. It enables you to have an experience, but it doesn't drive an experience. It might make it easier, so the experience is easier, but it does not do anything in the interaction area yet, right? We're hoping that AI might get us there, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it sophisticated enough. So then you look at the next part, which is now we're responsible for that move all day. And I know what happens when it gets to the service lane. I've run a store for 16 years. It's chaos, right? But it's organized chaos, in all fairness, right? But you still got to make sure that that car, somebody's paying attention to it, because it's not one car. It could be 10 cars that are in today with mobile pickup and service or pickup and delivery. So you really got to know how you get that car through the system so you can get that car back out of the system, back to the customer in time. Because you got some huge markets, like just take the Houston market we talked about a little earlier that we originally had our store in. Today we're in Dallas, but either one of those two markets at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is a gridlock, not like you have in Tennessee or I have where I live in San Antonio. I mean, it's a mess. So you really got to have somebody on top of the logistics of this move, because you still want to get that car back when promised, right? And then the dealership has to have the right tools. So we look for stores that aren't struggling with status updates. I picked your car up this morning at 9:30. I'm going to get it back to you by 5, let's say. You say, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the store has never reached out to you yet. I mean, we see that 40% of the time in our stores. We take 40% of the calls that come to us. Out of 1,000 calls, 400 are, where's my car at? And that just tells me those stores do not have a really good program in place for status update to keep in touch with that customer during the day. So, you know, the stores that we look at doing this with, we want to see what technology they have. You know, if there's technology today that lets you text back and forth, keeps the conversation alive all day long, sends you back that you need brakes today. Here's some pictures. Here's the tech. You know, would you like to have those done? Okay, just sign the form. We'll get that approved. Let's get you mobile paid before we send the car back to you. So we streamline that whole process. So those are the things we look at. Now, when the car comes in the lane, before it even gets there, we took 12 photographs of it and sent it to the used car manager or the new car sales director to say, listen, Brandon was one of the cars you targeted because you needed to buy that car. Here's what that car looks like. It'll be in your lane at 9:30 this morning. And then following up with you to see, did you get to take a look at that car? Because we know how those processes might fall apart because the dealership gets busy. So I'm not telling anybody anything. If you've worked in a dealership yourself, we can say we have this seamless process in place. But the reality is there's lots of things that interrupt that during the day. So where's your safety net? How do you make sure those processes still happen if Bobby doesn't show up for work today? Or if you got 12 cars, plus you have a lot of walk-ins today, how are you going to handle that properly? So, you know, I think that's the second part of this, is where it's tool-enabled, but also it's has a personality to it, where we're making sure the customer feels good about the fact that they know what's going on with their car during the day. And then our job is to get the car back. Hopefully, our job is to get them a new car back instead of the car they drove in. But at the end of the day, regardless, we got a customer back their car. The experience should be notated. We need to call them up and just say, how was that move today? I picked it up. I should be the one finishing it off. So Brandon, how did that go today? Oh, everything went great. Great. Is that something you might want to do on your next appointment? We can go ahead and get you enrolled. What that tells me is it working? If 90% of the people we pick up and deliver and we don't ask that question, we don't know if pickup and delivery is actually a viable product. But if 80% of them said, heck yeah, sign me up, I loved it, that's what turns retention and back to loyalty to me. Buying that car out of the lane is not retention, it's loyalty, right? So we struggle with both of those names in our industry today. The average store, retention-wise, only retains I've heard numbers in the 20 percentile range. I've seen them at 30 percentile, retaining customers over a 7-8 year period. Remember, the average car is 12 years old out there today. So I'm like, okay, so everybody talks about it. When are you going to do something about it is my question to the industry. We put programs in place, but are we really driving the programs? So the programs sound good, but they're not executed well. So to me, that's where an area, if I owned the dealership today, go back to those days when I ran one, I'd be like, I'm an expert at certain things. I'm not an expert at other things. I always learned that if you want to learn how to do something well, go find somebody that's doing it well. Even if eventually you want to take that back in-house because now you've learned how it works, then that's your choice. But you need to get started somewhere.
What's been the response for dealers that are using you guys for pickup?
The first response is, I have to tell you, if it's a current store we have or a new store, the current response is always this: wow, that's a no-brainer. And then my question back is, then why aren't you already doing it, right? So I know the reason they're not is they're not equipped, right? So I'm like, this is not a question about, do you think you need to do it? Do you want to do it? The question is simply, what's stopping you from doing it? Because we know how important it is.
Right.
I mean, I'm like you. I'm just an everyday customer myself, consumer. Convenience has a whole different level after COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And people have tried different things that have worked and not worked. I've seen stores like go from, great example, Home Depot is a great example, and Walmart. They thought the answer to COVID was to build towers in their stores where you could order whatever you wanted, food, groceries, hardware, equipment, and then drive by, go to your locker and pick it up. And then somebody came along in the grocery chain that you came out of and said, why don't we just friggin' do pick up a delivery out in the curb? Then somebody else said, why don't we just take it to their house?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can see people taking stabs at what's going on today, but the ones that really are paying attention are getting feedback from their customers. Today's game is not about what I want to deliver. It's what are my customers. So I have dealers today that go like, Bob, if I build a new showroom tomorrow, it would not have a waiting area for service. Because we don't want people coming here to wait. I mean, there's a couple of exceptions to that. I mean, I actually, in my own market, I can go to a smaller market about 20 miles away. I think people like to go there to get coffee and donuts in the morning and wait for their car. But that's not the norm.
Yeah. I saw that in the grocery store. There was a demographic that loved to be there at 6 a.m. and have a donut and coffee and sit around and talk, but that was a small percentage of who was coming in that store.
And I'd say that's a dying breed.
Yeah.
Look at the convenience we have today in other industries. I'll just give you another example. I just went to the dentist. I had to have a tooth replaced, a root canal. It used to take weeks to get a crown back, right? Now they have a 3D printer. They print it in the office. They install it at the same time.
Yeah. And it's funny about the grocery business is it's kind of come full circle, because there was a time when you would get your groceries delivered on bicycle. That was the norm, So everything old is new again, and everything new is old again, I guess.
Well, let me just tell you, I'm old enough to remember that my mom used to put out a little box in front of the doorway, and a truck would drive by with the milk guy would come and drop milk bottles off and pick the old ones up, right? That's kind of dating myself. But you think about it, I used to say CRM, customer relationship management. Think about it. The reason it came to be was because because of scalability, we lost touch with our regular customer because we got bigger. Our customer base got bigger. It was much harder to know everybody by name and what they needed when they came in to do service with us. Great illustration of that. I always tell a funny story, which you can edit this if you want to. I used to go to a cleaners, and when I pull up, I have 2 Ford trucks, a red one and a white one. I pull up in the white one, and when I got inside the cleaners, they'd always say, "Hi, Mr. G, how are you doing today?" Because they knew me.
Yeah.
And I'd take all my dirty clothes and I'd pile them on the counter. And they'd say, "Okay, it'll be done in a couple days." I say, "Thank you," and I'd leave. Back in those days, I was traveling every week. So, I only had certain times to go pick stuff up, and I needed it. So, I would do that regularly for years. And then all of a sudden, my wife had them do a red shirt, and she swears that they messed it up and that I was never allowed to use that cleaners again. Now, there's another cleaners on the other corner. I could see it. So she chose to use that cleaner. So she would, so I would take my clothes over there and I'd dump them all out on the counter. And they didn't know me. So they'd say, "Okay, sir, what gets dry cleaned? What gets laundered?" So now I'm sorting my dirty clothes on the counter. Okay. This experience. Okay. And then they give me a ticket. They tell me it'll be done next Wednesday. And I go, okay. So I travel so much, keeping track of my expenses was hard. Right. So next Wednesday, I go back into the store, pull up. They say, "Hi, can we help you?" I said, "Yeah, here to pick up my cleaning." They go, "Okay, do you have the tag?" I go, "What tag?" "The tag we gave you last week." I look everywhere. I can't find the tag. And they go, "Okay." So they take the clothes and it goes around that rack. That rack goes around. And then I see my clothes go around once, twice, back up once. They finally find my clothes. My laundry was $134, I believe. And they said, "Okay." I wrote them a check, believe it or not, back then. I wrote a check, and they had to InteliChek it before they let me leave with my laundry. So I did that twice. And then I started using my first cleaner again because they were so good. If I pulled it in the red truck, they'd say, "Oh, Mr. G, are you driving your wife's truck today?" They had all my clothes hung because they watched me walk in. So they went in the back and pulled my clothes, put them up. I could give them a check. They'd say, "Thank you, Mr. G. See you next week." And that's how easy that was. And I'm like, all right. So, you can't not do what your wife tells you to do.
Right.
So what I decided to do was I took all the covers off the cleaners bags before I took them in the house, and I hung them in my closet, and life was always good.
There you go.
I use that story just to illustrate what a customer experience looks like, what managing a relationship looks like. Now, today we can't do that because of the size we are and maybe the amount of business that comes through the door. But then you have to start using technology as an enabler so it brings it to you quick enough that you actually don't need to know me, but you can actually, what I would say, you have access to information so fast that you can have that same type of experience if you do your homework and you see the customer pull in. We've been doing this for years, but yet most of my dealers I service with still don't do it. You can pull into any dealership today that has the right technology, and by your license plate number, they already pull up an RO, know who you are before you even get out of your car. I mean, there are so many ways to leverage technology today, but one thing that the technology won't do is say, "Hi, Mr. G, how are you doing today? Why are you driving your wife's truck?"
Right.
Now that is memorable. That's why people keep going back if the service is good, right? So I always look at this and go like, all right, so why do we struggle with pickup and delivery? The scalable issue. It's a scalability issue. It's like CRM. You got to figure it out though. You cannot not do it because if I have 5 or 6 dealerships that have my brand in my marketplace. I mean, the one that figures out that they can come get my truck today while you and I are talking, or come out and service it in my driveway while you and I are talking. And then at lunchtime today, I want to go eat lunch. And I still have the ability to do that because my truck has already been serviced.
Yeah.
Or I don't need it today because I'm at the office and you guys can come get it, take it back, do whatever you want with it. I really don't care. And what's interesting is I think about 3-4 years ago, a friend of mine showed me on Amazon. I don't know if it's still there. It's under household I think it was under household services. They literally had a mobile service to change the oil in your car offered by Amazon. Now, I don't know if it's still there or not, if that service just didn't have durability, but think about it. They were doing it before the dealers even thought that they should do it in most cases. So we can't let the Amazons control our customers' convenience cycle.
To that point, there's a lot of talk of why dealerships have lost customers to the independents. And I noticed, take like video MPI, which to me is another no-brainer that, of course, the technology wasn't there before, but now it's a no-brainer. That would make me feel so much better as a consumer if I can see it. I need brakes. Yes, you're not trying to dupe me. And I'm, your Meinekes, they have that kind of thing as well. Are the independents getting into things like pickup and delivery as well? Because you want to talk about even a smaller, maybe more chaotic. Because from a 30,000 foot view, if all these dealers are losing their customers to the independents, at some point these independents are going to be so swamped. But are they doing things like this? Meanwhile, some dealerships are still asleep at the wheel and not even thinking about pickup and delivery. Do you know?
No, but I'd take a guess. My guess is that we allow them to steal our customer. And there's a reason for that. If I set an appointment with my local dealership here, I'm going to drive. Paragon Honda is a great example. If you listen to his video that he has out, that he has published all over the web, the reason he did this wasn't the 5 or 6 competing Honda stores in his market. There were 1,700, I believe. Maybe I'm misquoting this. I'm pretty close, though. 1,700 independents in his market. So he didn't do this because he didn't want to lose his Honda business to another Honda store. He didn't want to lose it to the independents. So if you think about it, the independents have the reverse problem, probably, because they keep getting more and more of this business. They probably don't have to do a lot to go get it. It's coming into their doors. Now, one of the reasons why is telematics today. Let's say my car tells me even that it's time for an oil change. I got to drive past, I got to go roughly 10 miles to my nearest dealer. To get to that 10-mile mark, I probably am going to pass 25 independents. And if it comes on, if it gets smart enough to ping me in real time, which is probably the next move, it'll come up on my dash and it'll tell me, do you want to schedule an appointment? And I think everybody's going to think, well, gee, we'll own that customer because when it pops up, it's going to give me a chance. Let's say it's a GM product. Probably give me a chance on OnStar to call and set an appointment. It probably gives me a chance just to go on and hit a link and schedule that appointment on my touch screen. The problem really is, though, it just alerted me I have an issue. A half a mile from where I'm at is a 5-minute oil change place. What stops me from pulling in there and getting it done? So while we think we're creating solutions fast enough, I'm going to tell you that really you got to be careful, because if that came on and said, would you like for us to pick up your car? That's even more convenient to me than pulling into a 5-minute oil change, because I still got to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If it said, would you like for us to pick up your car? We'll go ahead and do that. Click the button, schedule your appointment. I'm done. That's how convenient that was. So I think we have to really, to me, you've got to think through this all the ways through the process and go like, what are we really trying to do? I think that the more I always go like, if I call you on the phone, Brandon, and say, hey, Brandon, you own a Honda. I'd like to buy your Honda. First of all, you're going to be surprised because it might be the first time I called you. The second reason is you weren't considering selling your Honda. So you hear that's what we're doing in the market today in most cases. And I'm like, okay, but if I picked up your car, got it back, did all the service work for it, then called you and said, hey, listen, we saw your car was in for service. You've really taken great care of it. We saw that the maintenance has been kept up. We'd like to buy that car or trade you out of it. Would you be interested? That's reciprocal. So we got to be careful that the solutions we put in place are done for the right reasons, they're reciprocal to our customer, that there's value there for the customer to want to do something. It's great to come up with these ideas, but I'm like, how well thought out are they? Because I do know this, when I call and say, Brandon, your car's worth more today in the market than it's ever been worth before. And what I've turned you into now, potentially, is what? Shopper.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize my truck's worth that much. Well, gee, maybe I'll go look at another car. But I didn't take you out of the market. I may have created an environment to put you in a shopping mode as opposed to taking you out of the shopping mode. So I always look at what are we trying to accomplish and did it achieve our end in mind? And I think a lot of times we jump on programs that we haven't worked through the entirety of what is predictably do we want to have happen. I don't want to create a shopper in the marketplace. I want to take you out of that marketplace where those independents don't have an opportunity. And I love your comment. I know we're wrapping up with some time here, but I love your comment. Recently, one of my best customers is a Chevrolet store, and I happened to take my Ford truck in because the air wasn't working. It's Texas here. It's hot. So, I said that, yeah, I've got a truck at home that the air's not working. They're so backed up, they can't take me for 3 weeks. And the service director said, Bob, no problem. Bring it over tomorrow and we'll get it. We'll look at it. And I'm like, okay. So they looked at it and it needed a state inspection, which was, I don't know, $7 here in Texas. So they did that. But while I was with the dealer having a conversation, they texted me with all the other things it needed with a video MPI. When I left, my bill was $3,200. Now, just so you know, my first question is, why did not my Ford dealer, who services my truck regularly, see some of these chronic issues? Which leads me to believe they're not thorough when they're doing my oil change. They're not doing a very good multi-point inspection. So to come back to your point about virtual or video MPIs, I mean, not only did I agree to it, we texted back and forth. I had them do some price shopping for me to see if that's the best thing I could do. And then I mobile paid before I left. Now, to me, if every dealership did that, the independents would really have to stretch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you guys called me to get my truck in before I had to think about getting it in, you guys again probably will beat that independent in his space. He's not calling me. I've never had a dealer call me to get service work done. Never had an independent call me. So the first one that starts to do that, I would think that be the most convenient way for me to do business. Now remember, I've been doing this 44 years.
Yeah.
And nobody has ever called me to get my truck or car serviced in 44 years.
Well, let me ask you, does that put you in the mind to be shopping for a Chevrolet now?
Well, to me, I'm pretty set on the brands that I buy for a reason. But I got to tell you, with inventory availability so low, I can't get exactly what I want right now in one brand, but I can't get it in another brand. Now, depending on my need, if my need still isn't immediate, I might wait. But if my need becomes immediate, it causes me to switch. That's why brand loyalty, I worked for Toyota for a long time and I launched Lexus stores. We had a GM store, Cadillac store. You'll get loyalty in every brand. It's still only a little bit more than half the time will I buy that brand again. But it's only 30% I'll buy from the same dealer I bought from before. So those are loyalty numbers that are 20, 30 years old. They haven't really changed.
Yeah.
And if they have, I'd encourage somebody to send me out some new information because I haven't been tracking it recently, but I'm assuming that with retention rates in the 30, 40 percentile, that it's probably still true.
I know it's time, Bob. Did you want to get into any detail? We didn't really talk about retention moves specifically. Did you anything you want to touch on that? I don't want to leave anything out that you wanted to talk about.
Well, I think if you're a dealer today, you need to focus on giving your customers the convenience. There's a reason they're not coming back. You have loyal customers that will always come back to you. You have certain maintenances that we see that you'll come back religiously for. There are some maintenances that you may pass on. But at the end of the day, most retention numbers are so low that you're looking at, in a 12-month window, the average retention to be probably at benchmark is 85 to 86%. At 96 months, it's about in the 40s. So the real question is, how are you going to impact that? Because here's what you have today. Supply chain is causing us to have lots of problems in both sales and service. More in sales than service. For service, it's affecting part availability, right? You have, if your retention rate is not in the 70s or 80s over a 5 to 10 year period, you have more opportunity than you could even handle. So the question is, that's the real, I think, your objective. That you should clearly in your sights for the next 5 years have that on the table as your number one, I would think, goal is how do I get these customers back in service? Why? Service is more profitable. Service is more profitable than sales or used cars or F&I. So if you take a look at it, how do I get more customers back in for their services? I know that retention breeds loyalty, hopefully. Loyalty would cause them to become a new car customer. But the reality is the service business out there today, we have to figure out if we don't have enough stalls, how do we go do it mobily? You said you talked about guys like Ed Roberts. I mean, I heard he's in I can't even imagine 30, 40, 50 mobile vans today. When I met him, he was at 6. There's a guy who gets it. Mm-hmm. If you can't do all the service at your facility, go find a way to get it, because that's revenue dollars that nobody else is getting. So, even if you can't do that, you need to make sure your shops are full, to utilize pickup and delivery services to keep those customers coming back to you, not the independents. If you want to reach out to us at Traver, we have a full solution package around that. So it's fully managed that the dealer doesn't have to do anything but get the car serviced and back. That's it. We set up the appointment, we pick up the car, we deliver the car back, we do the survey after the delivery. The only thing they need to do is get us through the lane and do what's right with the customer, so the customer wants to continue to come back for service. But if I look today on my P&L and I was a dealer, I go like the only thing that I have, the biggest opportunity I have is service. And we've been saying this since COVID. Service is the new variable ops. It is. It's the biggest profit center potential in our stores. And the independents are going to be hard to keep up with that because of technology advancements. But on the flip side, as technology continues to advance like EV cars, they're not coming back for service as often. So you really got to take advantage of these customers that are in the market today that need service. They figured out a way not to use us for service. We got to give them a reason to use us for service again.
Awesome.
That's what I would say in closing. If you need help, we'd be glad to help you. There are other companies out there that might be able to help you. Look for help.
Bob, this was great.